13. 9. 10 Must not take vengeance or hold a grudge against one's fellow man. 19. 18 Care for the poor. 23. 6. 25. 35. 39-43 Care for widows and orphans. 22. 22-24. 24. 17-21. 27. 19 Respect for property. Stealing was forbidden. Compensation was required. 20. 15. 22. 1-4. 7 Wrongful desire for property and possessions belonging to one's fellow man was forbidden. 20. 17 Consideration for the handicapped. Could not ridicule or call down evil upon deaf person. He could not defend himself against statements he could not hear. The Book of Revelation presents in symbolic expression much information relating to Christ's presence and his manifestation and revelation. The symbolic picture of the crowned rider on the white horse depicted in Revelation 6. 1-2 corresponds to that of the rider of Revelation 19. 11-16, who is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, Christ Jesus. Revelation chapter 6 shows that when Christ rides forth as conquering king, he does not immediately bring about removal of wickedness from the earth, but rather, his ride is accompanied by war that takes peace away from the earth, as well as by food scarcity and deadly plague. Re 6. 3-8 This, in turn, parallels features found in Christ's prophecy at Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21. It therefore appears that Jesus' prophecy found in the Gospel accounts, which clearly involves the destruction of Jerusalem and its temple occurring in 70 CE, also has an application to the time of Christ's presence, thereby supplying a sign that allows for determining when Jesus is present and ruling from heaven as Messianic King. Mount 24. 3, 32, 33. Luke 21. 29-31. Other references to Christ's presence generally present encouragement to faithfulness and endurance until and during that time. 1th 19. 3. 12, 13. 5. 23. Just 5. 7, 8. 1 Joe 2. 28. The presence of the day of Jehovah. In his second letter, Peter exhorts his brothers to be awaiting and keeping close in mind the presence of the day of Jehovah, demonstrating this by the way they live. 2 Peter 3. 11, 12 They must be careful to keep Jehovah's day of judgment constantly in mind, realizing that it is close at hand. In that day of Jehovah, the governmental heavens of this wicked world will be destroyed as by fire, and the elements that go with it will not be able to hold together but will melt because of the intense heat. The present system under the control of Satan will come to its end. Since Jehovah God acts by and through his Son and appointed King, Christ Jesus. Joe 3. 35. Compare 1 Cor 15. 23, 24. It follows that there is a relationship between this promised presence of Jehovah and the presence of Christ Jesus. Logically, those who scoff at the proclamation of the one will scoff at the proclamation of the other. Again, the attitude of the people prior to the deluge is used as a corresponding example. 2 Peter 3. 5-7. Compare Mount 24. 37-39. The lawless one's presence. At 2 Thessalonians 2. 9-12 The apostle describes the lawless ones, but they needed further encouragement and admonition to resist weaknesses of the flesh. For this reason Paul, besides commending the Thessalonians for their faithful endurance, 1. 2-10. 2. 14. 3. 6-10 and comforting them with the resurrection hope, 4. 13-18, exhorted them to continue following a course approved by God and to do so more fully. 4. 1, 2 The apostle, among other things, counseled them to abstain from fornication, 4. 3-8, love one another in fuller measure, work with their hands, 4. 9-12, stay awake spiritually, 5. 6-10, have regard for those working hard among them, admonish the disorderly, speak consolingly to the depressed souls, support the weak, be long-suffering toward all, and abstain from every form of wickedness, 5. 11-22. Background for 2 Thessalonians. The faith of the Christians at Thessalonica was growing exceedingly, Their love for one another was increasing, and they were continuing to endure persecution and tribulation faithfully. Therefore, the Apostle Paul, as in his first letter, commended them and encouraged them to continue standing firm. 2th 3-12. 2. 13-17. Some in the congregation, however, were wrongly contending that the presence of Jesus Christ was imminent. Possibly even a letter wrongly attributed to Paul was interpreted as indicating that the day of Jehovah is here. 2th 1, 2. This may have been why the apostle made a point of the genuineness of his second letter, saying, "Here is my greeting, Paul's, in my own hand, which is a sign in every letter. This is the way I write." 3. 17. Not wanting the brothers to be seduced into accepting erroneous teaching, Paul showed that other events had to precede the coming of Jehovah's day. He wrote, "It will not come a letter to correct a wrong view regarding Christ's presence and to offer counsel on how to treat disorderly persons," written by Paul shortly after his first letter to the Thessalonians. Relief to come at the revelation of Christ. 1-12. The Thessalonians are commended for their endurance and faith while experiencing persecutions and distress. Relief will come at Christ's revelation. Then Jesus Christ, accompanied by powerful angels, will destroy those not obeying the good news and will be glorified in connection with his holy ones. Paul prays that the Thessalonians will be counted worthy, so that the Lord Jesus' name will be glorified in the man of lawlessness to be revealed before the presence of Christ. 2. 1-17. The Thessalonians are admonished not to be unsettled or excited by any textoi acute miritra longo, Thessalonica 1092, unless the apostasy comes first and the man of lawlessness gets revealed. 2. 3. A problem that had already existed earlier in the city named Nazareth, that there might be fulfilled what was spoken through the prophets. He will be called a Nazarene. Mount 2. 19-23. Nazareth is not mentioned in the Hebrew Scriptures. Some suppose Matthew had reference to some lost prophetic book or some unwritten tradition, but his expression, spoken through the prophets, is used by writers of the Christian Greek Scriptures only in reference to the same canonical collection of the Hebrew Scriptures we have today. The key to understanding, apparently, lies in equating Nazarene with Enitza, mentioned above as meaning sprout. With this in mind, it is evident that Matthew was referring to what Isaiah 11:1 had said concerning Messiah. "There must go forth a twig out of the stump of Jesse, and out of his roots a sprout Enitza will be fruitful." Another Hebrew word, simark, also means sprout and was used by other prophets when referring to the Messiah. Matthew used the plural, saying that prophets had mentioned this coming sprout. For example, Jeremiah wrote about the righteous sprout as an offshoot of David. 23. 5. 33. 15. Zechariah describes a king priest whose name is Sprout, a prophecy that could apply only to Jesus the Nazarene, the great spiritual temple builder. Zech 3. 8. 6. 12, 13. Nazareth Nazar middle. Reeth probably, Sprouton. A city in Lower Galilee where Jesus lived most of his earthly life, along with his half-brothers and half-sisters. Lu 2. 51, 52. Mount 13. 54-56. Both Joseph and Mary were residents of Nazareth when Gabriel announced the approaching birth of Jesus. Lu 1. 26, 27. 2. 4, 39. Later, after their return from Egypt, they took up residence in Nazareth again. Mount 2. 19-23. Lu 2. 39. Location. Most scholars identify Nazareth with An-Nasara Nazaret in Galilee. Pictures, Volume 2, p. 539. If this view is correct, Nazareth was situated in the low mountains just end of the Valley of Jezreel and approximately halfway between the east tip of the Sea of Galilee and the Mediterranean coast. It was in a mountain basin with hills rising 120 to 150 meters, 400 to 500 feet above it. The area was well populated, with a number of cities and towns near Nazareth. Also, it is estimated that one could walk from Nazareth to Ptolemais on the Mediterranean coast in 7 hours, to Tiberias on the Sea of Galilee in 5 hours, and to Jerusalem in 3 days. On one occasion people of Nazareth sought to throw Jesus from the brow of the mountain, upon which the invitation to the evening meal of the Lamb's marriage are immediately resurrected to join their fellow members of the bride class in heaven. They do not fall asleep in death in the sense of wading in a long sleep, as did the apostles, but, on dying, are changed, in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, during the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised up incorruptible, and we shall be changed. 1 Cor 15. 51, 52. Evidently, though, the marriage of the Lamb does not take place until after judgment has been executed upon Babylon the Great. Re 18. After describing the destruction of this great harlot, Revelation 19:7 says, "Let us rejoice and be overjoyed, and let us give him the glory, because the marriage of the Lamb has arrived and his wife has prepared herself." When all the 144,000 have been finally approved and sealed as faithful ones and have been resurrected to the heavens, the marriage can proceed. First resurrection. Revelation 20:5-6 refers to the resurrection of those who will reign with Christ as the first resurrection. The Apostle Paul speaks of this first resurrection also as the early resurrection from the dead, literally, the resurrection, the out of dead ones. PHP 3:11. NW, int on the expression Paul uses here. Robertson's Word Pictures in the New Testament, 1931, Volume IV, p. 454 says. Apparently Paul is thinking here only of the resurrection of believers out from the dead, and so XX out ten exanastation ten ek necron. Paul is not denying a general resurrection by this language, but emphasizing that of believers. Charles Ellicott's Commentaries 1865, Volume 2, p. 87 remarks on Philippians 3:11. The resurrection from the dead. That is, as the context suggests, the first resurrection Rev. XX 5, when, at the Lord's coming the dead in him shall rise first. 1 Thessalon 4:16, and the quick be caught up to meet him in the clouds. 1 Thess 4:17. Compare Luke XX 35. The first resurrection will include only true believers, and will apparently precede the second, that of non-believers. O textui acute miritra longo. Resurrection 788. Pentecost, which was 10 days after that ascension, when God through Jesus anointed the first members of those who will receive the heavenly resurrection. Ac 1. 3. 2. 1-4:33. The evildoer, Jesus said, would be in paradise. The word means a park or pleasure ground. The Septuagint rendered the Hebrew word for garden gan, as at Genesis 2:8, by the Greek word par-middle.sos. The paradise in Sheza. Rubenot, father of David's warrior Adina. 1 Ch 11:26-42. Shoshua. A people or an area named along with Pekod and Koa as providing military forces that Jehovah would bring against unfaithful Jerusalem. As 23:4-22-23. Shobab from a root meaning return. Bring back. 1. A son of Caleb the brother of Jerahmeel. Tribe of Judah. 1 Ch 2:9-18. 2. A son of David and Bathsheba. 2 Sa 5:14. 1 Ch 3:5-14. 4. Shobach, army chief of Syrian king Hadadezer. In directing an army of Syrians hired by the Ammonites to fight against David, Shobach lost the battle in his life along with 40-700 of his men. 2 Sa 10:15-19. His name is spelled Shofak at 1 Chronicles 19:16-18. Shubai, a Levite founder of the family of temple gatekeepers. Some of his descendants returned from the Babylonian exile with Zerubbabel. As 2:1-2:40-42. Ne 7:45. Shobal. 1. A Horite sheikh, son of Ser, and himself the father of 5 sons. Ge 36:20, 23, 29. 1 Ch 1. 38, 40. 2. A son of Hur descended from Caleb of the tribe of Judah. A number of descendants are credited to Shobal, including the inhabitants of Kiriath Jearim and other towns. 1 ch. 2. 50, 52, 53. 4. 1, 2. Shobek Shubek. An Israelite or the head of a family represented in the attestations to the trustworthy arrangement put forward during Nehemiah's governorship. NE 9. 38. 10. 1, 14, 24. Shobi Shubai. A loyal subject of King David. Shobi and 2 others brought much-needed supplies to David when Absalom's rebellion caused the king and his party to flee Jerusalem. 2 17. 27-29 Shobi was the son of Nahash from Rabbah of the sons of Ammon. See Nahash no. 3. Shoham Shuhamonics. A Merarite Levite involved in David's reorganization of the Levitical services. Son of Yaazia. 1 ch. 24. The Book of the Affairs of the Days of the Kings of Judah 1 Chi 15. 7, 23, and the Book of the Affairs of the Days of the Kings of Israel 1 Chi 14. 19. 16. 14. One of the oldest extant Hebrew manuscripts containing the books of Kings in full is dated 1008 CE. The Vatican No. 1209 and the Alexandrine manuscript contain the books of Kings in Greek, but the Sinaitic manuscript does not. Fragments of the books of Kings evidently dating from the BCE period have been found in the Qumran caves. The framework of these books shows that the writer or compiler gave pertinent facts about each king for the purpose of chronology and to reveal God's estimate, favorable or unfavorable, of each king. The relationship of their reigns to the worship of Jehovah stands out as the most important factor. After considering the reign of Solomon, there is, with some exceptions, a general set pattern for describing each reign, as 2 parallel lines of history are interwoven. For the kings of Judah there is usually given first an introductory synchronism with the contemporaneous king of Israel, then the age of the king, the length of his reign, the place of rule, and the name and home of his mother, the latter being an item of interest and importance, because at least some of the kings of Judah were polygamous. In concluding the account for each king, the source of the information, the burial of the king, and the name of his successor are given. Some of the same details are provided for each king of Israel, but the king's age at the time of his accession and the name and home of his mother are not given. Information supplied in 1st and 2nd Kings has been very useful in the study of Bible chronology. See chronology. The books of Kings are more than just annals or a recital of events as in Old Text or acute Miritra Longo. Kings wrote 174 ivory that he built 1 car 22. 39, are well attested by the ruins found at Samaria. The Moabite stone relates some of the events involved in King Mesh's revolt against Israel, giving the Moabite monarch's version of what took place. 2 Chi 3. 4, 5 This alphabetic inscription also contains the Tetragrammaton. The name Pekah is found in an analytic text credited to Tiglath-Pileser 3. 2 Chi 15. 27 The campaign of Tiglath-Pileser III against Israel is mentioned in his royal annals and in an Assyrian building inscription. 2 Chi 15. 29 The name Hoshi has also been deciphered from inscriptions of Tiglath-Pileser's campaign. 2 Chi 15. 30. Ancient Near Eastern Texts, edited by J. Pritchard, 1974, pages 282-284. While some of Assyrian King Sennacherib's engagements are mentioned in his annals, the angelic destruction of his army of 185,000 when it threatened Jerusalem is not mentioned. 2 Chi 19. 35, and we would not expect to find in his boastful records in the cow a bird that picks up seeds. The word also carries the thought of one who picks up scraps of knowledge and repeats such without order or method. Those philosophers disdained Paul and his message. Basically the Epicurean philosophy was that the obtaining of pleasure, particularly mental pleasure, was the chief good in life. 1 Cor 15. 32. Though it acknowledged gods, it explained these as being beyond human experience and concern. The philosophy of the Stoics stressed fate or natural destiny. One should be of high virtue, but strive for indifference to pain or pleasure. Neither Epicureans nor Stoics believed in the resurrection. O textoi acute muritra longo. Phoenicia 635. All toward Jehovah was counted to him as righteousness, and God made a covenant for the priesthood to remain in his line to time indefinite. New 25. 1-3, 6-15. PS 106. 30, 31. During his lifetime Phinehas served in various capacities. He was the priestly representative in the army that executed Jehovah's vengeance upon Midian. New 31. 3, 6. When it was thought that 3 tribes were forsaking Jehovah's worship, he headed a group of investigators. Jos 22. 9-33. He was chief of the tabernacle gatekeepers. 1ch 9. 20. After the burial of his father in the hill of Phinehas, he served in the office of high priest. Jos 24. 33. JG 20. 27, 28. His name is prominent in several post-exilic genealogies. 1ch 6. 4, 50. Es 7. 5. 8. 2. 2. The younger of the 2 good-for-nothing sons of priest Eli. 1 3. 2. 12. While serving as priests, he and his brother Hophani cohabited with women at the sanctuary and treated the offering of Jehovah with disrespect. 2. 13-17, 22. When feebly reprimanded by their father, they refused to hear. For their wickedness God pronounced judgment against them. It was fulfilled when they were both killed on the same day in battle with the Philistines. 2. 23-25, 34. 3. 13. 4. 11. News about the capture of the ark and the deaths of her father-in-law and her husband was too much for Phinehas' wife. She was thrown into shock and died giving birth to Ichabod. 4. 17-21. 3. A Levite, whose son Eleazar helped inventory the temple treasures in the time of Ezra, 468 BCE as rate. 33. GE 24. 20. X2. 16-19. Throughout the hills of Palestine, wells were dug in the limestone, and steps, leading down to the water, were often cut in the rock. In some wells, after descending, the one drawing water simply dipped a vessel directly into it. However, from very deep sources, water was commonly drawn up by means of a leather bucket. New 24. 7. Or an earthen wedge. RGE 24. 16. Suspended from a rope. See Jacob's fountain. West. The Hebrews indicated direction from the viewpoint of a person facing east. Thus the west was behind them and might be implied by the Hebrew word amiddle.cho, meaning behind. Issa 9. 12. Most often, west-westward, or western is denoted by the Hebrew word yam meaning sea, as at Jos 1. 4, evidently because the Mediterranean, or Great Sea, lay in that direction from the Promised Land. GE 28. 14. X 10. 19. 38. 12. New 34. 6. Zek 14. For the context must be considered to determine whether yam means sea or denotes the west. Jos 15. 8-12. 2ch4. 2-4, 15. Another Hebrew word marmiddle.arav is used to denote either the sunset Isla 43. 5. 59. 19 or the west. 1ch 26. 30. 2ch 32. 30. It is used to help convey the thought of great distance in the comforting assurance of Jehovah's mercy toward imperfect humans. As far off as the sun rises from the sunset, so far off from us he has put our transgressions. PS 103. 12. When Jesus said that many would come from eastern parts and western parts to recline at the table in the kingdom with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the Greek text at Matthew 8:11 says literally from risings and settings. Here the Greek word dimiddle.sme relates to the direction of the sunset, that is, the west. Int dimiddle.sme is also used elsewhere to denote the west. Mount 24. 27. Lu 12. 54. 13. 29. Re 21. 13. Wheat. An important cereal crop that has long supplied man with a valuable item of diet and has at times, in recent years as anciently, been sold at a price double or triple that of barley. Compare to Chi 7. 1, 16, 18. Re 6. 6. Wheat Heb. Chick middle doctor. 1, LXX, where the reference is to Jehovah's pardoning revolt, and he used a form of the word a middle dot phi middle dot me, as does the Greek Septuagint o textoi acute miritra longo, Partridge 579. Among his great works, Solomon made both gardens and parks orchards, KJ. Heb. Far middle dot decim, in which he planted fruit trees of all sorts. EC2. 5. He uses the same term in his superlative song when he as the shepherd lover described the Shulamite maiden's skin as a paradise of pomegranates, with the choicest fruits. Ka 1. 1. 4. 12, 13. In post-exilic times, Nehemiah 2. 7, 8 shows that the Persian king had placed Asaph as the keeper of the park that belongs to the king, and that application had to be made for permission to fell trees from this park for the reconstruction work in Jerusalem. See forest. Garden. Parmash to par middle dot mashtar, from Persian, possibly meaning the very first. One of Haman's 10 sons. As 9. 9. Parmenas Parmi middle dot nas. One of the 7 recommended to the apostles and appointed by them to ensure a just daily distribution of food supplies in the Jerusalem congregation after Pentecost of 33 CE Acts 6. 1-6. Panak Parnak. A Zebulonite whose son Elizaphan was the tribal representative in dividing the promised land. New 34. 17, 18, 25. Parosh Parosh Flee. Founder of a family in Israel. There were 2,172 of his descendants who returned to Jerusalem with Zerubbabel in 537 BCE as 2. 1-3. NE 7. 8. By the time that Ezra arrived in 468 BCE with 150 sons of Parosh led by Zechariah, some of their family already in Jerusalem had taken foreign wives, whom they later sent away. Ezra 8. 1, 3. 10. 25, 44. Pedaiah, one of the family, repaired a section of Jerusalem's wall. Ne 3. 25. The head of the Parosh family attested to the later covenant agreeing to keep the law of Jehovah. Ne 9. 38. 10. 1, 14. Vashantapar middle dot shan middle dot Dartha, from Persian, possibly meaning the investigator. One of Haman's 10 sons. As 9. 7. Parsin Parsin. One of the words mysteriously written on the wall of Belshazzar's palace and read and interpreted by Daniel. Dar 5. 25. It is the plural number of Perez, which means a half shekel, a division of a shekel. In giving the interpretation, Daniel did not use the plural parsin, but used the singular form Perez. Dar 5. 28. Perhaps this Rabba, or the eastern Cedar 3. 17. S 47. 18. And the Sea of Galilee, the Sea of Chinnereth, or the Sea of Tiberias. Mount 4. 18. New 34. 11. Joe 6. 1. Sea Galilee, Sea of. Great Sea. Red Sea. Salt Sea. In biblical references, the particular body of water intended by the expression the sea often has to be determined from the context. X 14. To compare a text to a acute miritra longo, see 882 according to its kind. And God got to see that it was good. With that God blessed them, saying, Be fruitful and become many and fill the waters in the sea basins, and let the flying creatures become many in the earth. And there came to be evening, and there came to be morning, the 5th day. GE 1. 20-23. In saying let the waters swarm, God was not leaving the emergence of life to the seas themselves, to bring forth some primeval form from which all other animals evolved. For the account also says that God proceeded to create marine creatures, according to their kinds. Also in the record of the sixth day and the creation of land animals, God is represented as saying, "Let the earth put forth living souls according to their kinds." God did not command the sea to put forth living things for the land, or let these things evolve from the sea, but God proceeded to make each kind to suit the habitat each was to occupy. G1. 24-25. Illustrative use. While the promised land was to extend from the Red Sea to the Sea of the Philistines, the Mediterranean Sea, and from the wilderness to the river Euphrates, the description of the dominion of the coming Messianic king as being from sea to sea and from the river to the ends of the earth would apparently refer to the entire globe. X 23. 31. Zek 9. 9, 10. Compared R2. 34, 35, 44, 45. This is indicated by Matthew and John in their application of the prophecy of Zechariah, in which prophecy Zechariah quotes Psalm 72. 8. Mount 21. 4-9. Joe 12. 12-16. Overflowing armies. Jeremiah described the sound of the attackers of Babylon as being like the sea that is boisterous. Joe 50. 42. Hence, when he foretold that the sea would come up over Babylon, he evidently meant the flood of conquering troops under the Medes and Persians. Joe 51. 42. Compared R9. 26. Masses alienated from God. Isaiah likened the wicked people of earth, the masses alienated from God. 17-19, 22, 28. Stomach. An enlarged part of the alimentary canal in humans and animals. In some animals the stomach includes 4 compartments. Under the law, a person who sacrificed a victim had to give the stomach heb. QE middle to the priest. 18. 3. In the Christian Greek scriptures, the Apostle Paul recommended that Timothy use a little wine for the sake of his stomach. Gr. Stomachos. 1-5. 23. In some instances where the Hebrew words translated belly and inward parts are used, they apparently include the stomach. PR 13. 25. John 1. 17. The same is true in the usage of belly in the Christian Greek scriptures, as, for example, at Romans 16. 18 and 1 Corinthians 6. 13. See belly. Stone. A material widely used in building. Its durable nature has been of great aid to archaeologists in gaining some knowledge of the past. Temples, palaces, monuments, and other structures of stone were erected by the Egyptians, Assyrians, and other nations. On many of these structures are pictorial representations and inscriptions relating events, describing victories, and depicting customs, which throw light on their history as well as on their everyday life. The Hebrews used stone widely in buildings. Le 14. 40, 41, walls NE 4. 3. PR 24. 31, altars X 20. 25, millstones JG 9. 53, water vessels Joe 2. 6, weights PR 16. 11, for covering wells, caves, and tombs GE 29. 8. Joe's 10. 18. Joe 11. 38, as well as for many other purposes. However, the Hebrews did not erect monuments with pictorial bas-reliefs, as did the pagan nations. Consequently, little is known about their appearance, the exact styles of their clothing, and so forth. But the Bible provides a richer history of Israel, their manner of life, and their personalities than do the stone remains of any of the other nations. Stone cutting was a highly developed craft. 2 Sir 5. 11. 1 Chi 5. 18. The stone Zotex to acute Muritra Longo, Storehouse 1037 Pebble here translates the Greek word Piesiphan. The Apostle Paul uses the word when he recounts his former persecution of Christians, saying, I cast my vote Piesiphan. Literally, voting pebble against them. Act 26. 10 pebbles were used in courts of justice in rendering judgment or voicing an opinion of either innocence or guilt. White pebbles were used for pronounced wrongdoers. In any case, o textoi acute miritra longo, long-suffering 263. Suffering is better than physical mightiness, and it will accomplish more. He that is slow to anger is better than a mighty man, and he that is controlling his spirit than the one capturing a city. PR 16. 32. The man who is not long in spirit, but who bursts forth without restraint, is open to the invasion of any and all improper thoughts and actions. 4. As a city broken through, without a wall, is the man that has no restraint for his spirit. PR 25. 28. All his spirit is what a stupid one lets out, but he that is wise keeps it calm to the last. PR 29. 11. For these reasons, the wise man counsels not to be short in spirit. Do not hurry yourself in your spirit to become offended, for the taking of offense is what rests in the bosom of the stupid ones. EC 7. 9. Jehovah's long-suffering. When Jehovah took Moses up into Mount Horeb and showed him some of his glory, he declared before Moses, Jehovah, Jehovah, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger and abundant in loving kindness and truth, preserving loving kindness for thousands, pardoning error and transgression and sin, but by no means will he give exemption from punishment. X 34. 5-7. This truth about Jehovah's slowness to anger was repeated by Moses, David, Nahum, and others. New 14. 18. NE 9. 17. PS 86. 15. 103. 8. Joe 2. 13. John 4. 2. Nah 1. 3. While long-suffering is an attribute of Jehovah, it is always expressed in harmony with his primary attributes of love, justice, wisdom, and power. 1 Joe 4. 8. 32. 4. PR 2. 6. PS 62. 11. Issa 40. 26, 29. Justice is due, first of all, to God's own name. That name must be exalted above all others in the universe. And this is essential for the well-being of all his creatures. The magnifying of his name is one of his chief reasons for long-suffering, as the Apostle Paul explains. If, now, God, although having the will to demonstrate his wrath and to make his power known, tolerated with much long-suffering vessels of wrath made fit for destruction, in order that he might make known the riches of his glory upon vessels of mercy, which he prepared beforehand for glory, namely, us, whom he called not only from among Jews, but also from among nations. What of it? Row 9. 22-24. God, in exercising long-suffering, is taking out a people prophecy against Babylon. After reading it aloud in that city, Sarai pitched it, tied to a stone, into the Euphrates, as a symbol of Babylon's future fall, never to rise again. J 51. 59-64. Quartus Cutus from Latin, meaning fourth. One living in Corinth, whose greetings Paul included in his letter to the Romans, about 56 CE 16. 23. Having a Roman name and knowing the brothers in Rome, he may have formerly been of that congregation. Queen. In the modern sense, a title given either to a wife of a king or to a female monarch. In the Bible the title most often refers to women outside the kingdoms of Israel and Judah. The Hebrew word most nearly expressing the idea of queen as it is understood today is Mal-Middle-Ka. But it was rare in the Orient for a woman to possess ruling authority. The Queen of Sheba may have been one with such power. 1 Kai 10. 1. Mount 12. 42. In the Christian Greek scriptures, queen is translated from the word ba-middle.c-lis-middle.sa, the feminine form of the word for king. The title is applied to Queen Candace of Ethiopia. Agate. 27. In the Hebrew scriptures Mal-Middle.Ka is more often used with reference to a queen consort, or the leading wife of a king of a foreign power. Vashti, as the chief wife of King Ahasuerus of Persia, was a consort queen rather than a ruling one. She was replaced by the Jewess Esther, making Esther consort queen, and while Esther had royal dignity, she was not an associate ruler as one. 9, 12, 19. 2. 17, 22. 4. 11. Any authority she might have had was by the king's grant. Compares 8. 1-8, 10. 9. 29-32. Israel. The Hebrew word Ra, translated queen in some versions, means, more correctly, lady or mistress. In the instances where the title is used, it seems to apply mainly to the mother or grandmother of the king, such women being given royal respect, for example, Jezebel the mother of King Jehoram of Israel. 2 Kai 10. 13 When Solomon's mother approached him with a request, he bowed to her and had a throne set for her at his right. 1 Kai 2. 19 The lady could be deposed by the king, as was Maacah the grandmother of King Asa of Judah, whom he removed from being lady because she had made a horrible idol to the sacred pole. 1 Kai 15. 13. No woman could legally become head of state in the kingdoms of Israel and Judah. 17. 14. 15 However, after the death of her son Ahaziah king of Judah, Athaliah, who was the daughter of wicked King Ahab of Israel and his wife Jezebel, destroyed all the kingdom except Ahaziah's son Jehoash, whom Ahaziah's sister Jehoshebet could properly be passed on to the Christian congregations as acceptable Christian tradition. This was so, for example, regarding the celebration of the Lord's evening meal. 1 Co 11. 2. 23 The teachings and examples set by the apostles constituted valid tradition. Thus, Paul, who had personally toiled with his hands so as not to be a financial burden on his brothers, Acts 18. 3. 20. 34. 1 Co 9. 15. 1 Th 2. 9. Could urge the Thessalonian Christians to withdraw from every brother walking disorderly and not according to the tradition sin they had received. One who would not work was plainly not following the fine example or tradition of the apostles. 2 Th 3. 6-11. The traditions that are necessary for o text to acute miritra longo, trans 1120 The Jewish religious leaders were correctly termed betrayers and murderers, for they employed traitorous Judas, personally turned their fellow countryman Christ over to the Romans, and then, in an outrage of justice, opposed the declaration of Jesus' innocence and demanded his death. Joe 18. 28. 19. 16. Act 3. 13-15. 7. 52. Another outstanding example of a traitor listed in the Bible was Ahithophel. Though having been King David's trusted counselor, he joined Absalom's insurrection. 2 Sa 15. 12, 31. 16. 20-23. Compare PS 55. 20, 21. God thwarted the traitorous advisor's counsel, leading to Ahithophel's death by suicide. 2 Sa 17. 23 Evidently David had other experiences with persons who turned against him. A number of modern Bible translations render the plural Hebrew participial form of Gad meaning deal treacherously as traitors at Psalm 59. 5. Do not show favor to any hurtful traitors. J.B., N.E., N.W., the superscription of the psalm suggests that it relates to the time when Saul sent men to watch David's house in order to kill him. 1 Sa 19. 11-18 So the traitors mentioned at Psalm 59. The fifth of may have been associates of David who had deserted him or who were willing to betray him in that hour of trial. Or, since the preceding words call on God to turn his attention to all the nations, the term traitors may have referred to all opposers of God's will, whether inside or outside Israel. The prophecy in 2 Timothy 3. 1-5 about conditions to exist in the last days indicates that there would be many betrayers, or traitors gr. Pro-middle.utai. Christians were advised to 18. Snow has even fallen in Jerusalem as late as April the 6th, as it did in 1949. Nisan came at about the close of the rainy season, and the latter or spring rains were counted on to bring the grain to fullness prior to the harvest. 11. 14. Ho 6. 3. J 5. 24 At this time of the year the Jordan River was normally at flood stage. Jos 3. 15. 1 Ch 12. 15 The barley harvest began along the coastal plains, and down in the subtropical Jordan Valley the wheat was reaching maturity. Ru 1. 22. 2. 23. About this time, harvested flax on Rahab's rooftop in Jericho provided a place for the Israelite spies to hide. Jos 2. 6. 4. 19. Adjusting the lunar calendar. God's command required that the Israelites offer up a sheaf of the first fruits of their harvest on the 16th day of Nisan Abib, and that, on the 50th day thereafter, they offer up a second grain offering. These offerings corresponded naturally with the barley and wheat harvests, respectively. This precept made essential an adjustment in the calendar of lunar months used by the Israelites. There was need to compensate for the difference of 111/4 days between the full solar year and the shorter lunar year. Otherwise, within the space of 3 years, the month of Nisan would arrive some 33 days earlier in the season and far ahead of the barley harvest. The Bible record does not specify what method was originally used by the Israelites to accomplish such coordination, but the evidence indicates that a 13th month was added every 2 or 3 years to restore the seasons to their proper position in the calendar year. It seems likely that it was determined by simple observation, relating the new moon to the vernal, or spring, equinox of the sun, which comes about March the 21st of each year. If the new moon that would ordinarily mark the start of the month of Nisan Abib was too distant from the time of the spring equinox, then the month was counted as a 13th. Or in Turculario textoi acute miritra longo. Nishrok 506 Nisan continues to be observed by his followers till this day as the time for memorializing Christ's death. Lu 22. 19, 20. See Lord's evening meal. Nisrok. A deity worshipped by Sennacherib the king of Assyria. It was in the temple of Nisroch that Adrammelech and Sharezer murdered their father Sennacherib. 2K 19. 36, 37. Issa 37. 38. A number of scholars suggest identifying Nisroch with the fire god Nusku, who, it was thought, assisted in bringing defeat to the enemy in warfare and served as messenger of the gods as well as a dispenser of justice. However, certain identification of Nisroch with a known Assyrian deity is not now possible. Ru 2. 17. And for reaping olives the 24. 20. Issa 24. 13. Also, shepherds used the crook in leading the flock, to manage and help them. As to selecting animals to be given to the sanctuary as a tithe, the law said, as for every 10th part of the herd and flock, everything that passes under the crook, whatever falls under the shepherd's care, the 10th head should become something holy to Jehovah. He should not examine whether it is good or bad, neither should he exchange it. Law 27. 32, 33. It is said that the shepherd stood at the gate of the sheepfold as the sheep were coming out with a piece of cloth soaked in dye fastened to the end of his staff. This he touched to every 10th sheep and set aside the ones thus marked as the tithe. Compare Jah 33. 13. As a symbol of authority. One staff was considered a valuable personal possession, and some staffs were doubtless identifiable as belonging to the individual. Judah gave Tamar his staff and his signet ring as security until he should send her a kid of the goats in payment for his relations with her. Ge 38. 18, 25. Chieftains carried a rod as a symbol of authority. Therefore the Bible often uses the rod to symbolize the authority one has or the authority vested in him by another. Moses' rod became a symbol of his authority and commission from God when he appeared before the older men of Israel, also when he appeared before Pharaoh and the magic-practicing priests of Egypt. X 4. 17, 29-31. 7. 9-12. In the latter case the rod is said to be Aaron's, but it was evidently Moses' rod used by Aaron as Moses' spokesman, as a comparison of Exodus 7. 15, 17 indicates. After this, Moses' rod was used many times as a symbol that he was appointed and backed up by Jehovah with authority as the nation's otextoi acute miritra longo rod, staff 818 flock with his staff, but with an iron rod. Re 2. 27. 12. 5. 19. 15. The oppressive rod, or staff of rule or authority, that the enemies of Israel wielded over her is referred to at Isaiah 9. 4. 14. 5. God used the nations around Israel, such as Assyria, to execute punishment on Israel for her sins, and in this action those nations were as a rod of punishment, or chastisement, under God's authority or allowance. Yet these nations acted, not out of love for Jehovah or hate for the sins of Israel, but out of animosity toward both God and Israel, and they went beyond their commission and enjoyed heaping additional afflictions upon Israel. Besides that, these powers, especially Assyria and Babylon, lifted themselves up in haughtiness against Jehovah God himself. God said of Assyria by means of 1 Ch 2. 3-5, 25, 34, 40 Sismai possibly lived during the period of the judges. Sister. In the scriptures the term is applied to full sisters and to half-sisters, those having the same father but different mothers. Ge 34. 1, 27. 1 Ch 3. 1-9, or the same mother but different fathers, as in the case of the sisters of Jesus. Mount 13. 55, 56. Mr. 6. 3. Some of Adam's sons obviously married their sisters, since all humankind sprang from Adam and Eve. Ge 3. 20. 5. For Adam's wife Eve, as bone of his bones and flesh of his flesh, was even more closely related than a sister. Ge 2. 22-24 There was no stigma attached to marriage to sisters or half-sisters. The account reports that more than 2,000 years later, Abraham married Sarah his half-sister. Ge 20. 2, 12 The Mosaic Law, some 430 years later, however, forbade such unions as incestuous. Law 18. 9, 11. 20. 17 Doubtless, as the human race deteriorated from Adam's original perfection, it became detrimental for closely related persons to marry. Sister in its broader usage included fellow countrywoman of a nation. New 25. 17. 18 nations or cities that had a close relationship or that carried on similar moral practices were likened to sisters. J 3. 7-10. S 16. 46, 48, 49, 55. 23. 32, 33. The Hebrew word for sister oath is translated the other when describing the placing of objects in relationship to corresponding pieces in the tabernacle and in Ezekiel's visions. X 26. 3, 5, 6, 17. As 1. 9, 23. 3. 13. In the Christian congregation, Jesus taught that spiritual relationships take priority over fleshly ones. Those women who did his Father's will were sisters held in higher regard than mere fleshly relations. Mount 12. 50. Mr. 3. 34, 35 One willing to sever earthly ties, if necessary, for the sake of the kingdom, will have 100-fold of sisters and other family relations now, plus everlasting life. O textoi acute muritra longo, Cert 3 976 Instrument varied from about 20 to 46 centimeters 8 to 18 inches in length, according to extant ancient specimens as well as a jet gained through human experience and research. Compare EC 7. 29. To 32. 5. So, while it introduced a major divisive factor into human society, the confusion of human speech actually benefited human society in retarding the attainment of dangerous and hurtful goals. Ge 11. 5-9. Compare ISLA 8. 9, 10. One has only to consider certain developments in our own times, resulting from accumulated secular knowledge and man's misuse thereof, to realize what God foresaw long ago would develop if the effort at Babel were allowed to go unhindered. Philology, the comparative study of languages, generally classifies languages into distinct families. The parent language of each major family usually has not been identified. Much less is there any evidence pointing to any one parent language as the source of all the thousands of tongues now spoken. The Bible record does not say that all languages descended, or branched off, from Hebrew. In what is commonly called the Table of Nations Ge 10, the descendants of Noah's sons Shem, Ham, and Japheth are listed and in each case are grouped according to their families, according to their tongues, in their lands, by their nations. Ge 10. 5, 20, 31, 32 It appears, therefore, that, when miraculously confusing human language, Jehovah God produced, not dialects of Hebrew, but a number of completely new languages, each capable of expressing the full range of human feeling and thought. Thus, after God confused their language, not only did the builders at Babel lack one set of words G11. One common vocabulary, but they also lacked a common grammar, a common way of expressing the relationship between words. Professor S.R. Driver stated, languages, however, differ not only in grammar and roots, but also in the manner in which ideas are built up into a sentence. Different races do not think in the same way, and consequently the forms taken by the sentence in different languages are not the same. A Dictionary of the Bible, edited by J. Hastings, 1905, Volume IV, p. 791. Thus, different languages require quite different thought patterns, making it difficult for a new learner to think in the language. Compare 1 Co 14. 10, 11. This is also why literal translation of something said or written in an unfamiliar language may seem illogical, often causing persons to say, but it doesn't make sense. O texto e acute miritra longo. Language 203 developed into separate languages, their relationship to their sister dialects or to the parent language sometimes becoming almost indistinguishable. Even Shem's descendants, who apparently did not figure among the crowd at Babel, came to speak not only Hebrew but also Aramean, Akkadian, and Arabic. Rate 21-27. In the interim between the closing of the Hebrew scripture part of the Bible and the birth of God's Son on earth, God's power must have been active in order to guarantee the preservation of the nation of Israel, its capital city Jerusalem, the neighboring town of Bethlehem, the temple with its priesthood, and other features of the Jewish system. For all of these would have to be there for the fulfillment of prophecy in Christ Jesus and his activity. History relates attempts at replacing the Jewish system of things completely by process of Hellenization, that is, by converting it to the Grecian way of worship. But this ultimately failed. See Greece, Greeks' effect of Hellenization on the Jews. Christ the power of God. From Jesus' miraculous birth forward, God's power was displayed toward and through him as never before. Like the psalmist, he became just like a miracle to many people. PS 71. 7 Jesus and his disciples, like Isaiah and his children, were as signs and as miracles in Israel from Jehovah of armies, portending the future and revealing God's purpose. Is 8. 18. Heb 2. 13. Compare Lu 2. 10-14. In Jesus, God's powerful workings during thousands of years now found fulfillment, came to fruition. Rightly the apostle could speak of Jesus as the power of God and the wisdom of God. 1 Co 1. 24. Jesus proved to be the long-awaited Messiah, o texto e acute miritra longo, powerful works 664 constantly acknowledging God as the source of his powerful works. Job 5. 19, 26. 7. 28, 29. 9. 3, 4. 14. 10 honest persons recognize the majestic power of God manifested through him. Lu 9. 43. 19. 37. Job 3. 2. 9. 28-33. Compare Lu 1. 68. 7. 16. What did the miracles of Jesus portend? What Jesus did gave proof of God's interest in mankind, evidence of what God would eventually do for all loving righteousness. Jesus' powerful works were largely related to mankind's problems, first and most basic among which is that of sin, with all its damaging effects. Sickness and death are concomitants of sin, and Jesus' ability to heal sickness of all kinds. Mount 8. 14, 15. Lu 6. 19. 17. 11-14. 8. 43-48 and even to resurrect the dead. Mount 9. Spiritual virginity. Even as the high priest in Israel could take only a virgin as his wife. Lu 21. 10, 13, 14. Compare as 44. 22. So the great high priest, Jesus Christ, must have only a virgin as his spiritual bride in heaven. Re 21. 9. Heb 7. 26. Compare F5. 25-30. Hence, the Apostle Paul was deeply concerned about the purity of the Corinthians.